Hi, and welcome to Fabric Frenzy, the October version, where we'll talk about all the new things that have happened in Microsoft Fabric and in Power BI since, well, last month. So at Felmine, we're doing this Fabric Frenzy once per month, where we talk about news, we spotlight into specific features, and sometimes more than that. And today we have what I believe is a very interesting spotlight because we're looking into the new experience in Fabric. We're looking into Data Activator, which was released for public preview here in October. So for anyone new tuning in who may or may not know exactly what kind of size Fabric is a combination of all the tools we already know and love from Microsoft in one platform. So we have Data Factory, we have the Synapse capabilities, we have Power BI, and then finally OneLake as the one tool that unites the rest. And now we also have finally the Data Activator experience. So in Fabric, we are able to do everything from getting our data to preparing that data in our tools to using that data and storing that data. So it's really a full stack data analytics, but also data engineering experience where we can do everything around data in one place. It's very nice. So what's in the bag of news for this month? So in October, we now have the Data Activator. We got the release of the Fabric roadmap. We got the online data modeling editing capabilities in Power BI, the new and fresh look for the homepage and icons in the Power BI service, and finally, the release of the semantic link. What all of these are and how we can use them is what we will spend the next few minutes about. So let's start with the first one. We got a new user interface. So a fresh new pack of icons with different colors that has kind of a different meaning. So you can have something like yellow representing reporting. You have something like magenta red representing real time, but also the usage of data in real time. Have some blue, which is storage, and purple again, storage and data sets and such. And green, compute and transformation. So Microsoft didn't actually release a proper explanation of what these colors meant, but saying that they put them into natural categories, and then we can decide for ourselves what exactly they're supposed to mean. But it's really cool. I mean, they removed colors. People were not happy about that, and then reintroduced them in a new way. So, well, there's that. But besides that, they've also redesigned the main page when you open Power BI. So as you can see here on the left side of the screen, I'll just make it a bit larger here. There is a new page with a home page. You can open reports. There's a list and quick access to former reports. What they actually have done here is aligned the experience much more with what we already see with other Microsoft tools in Office. So this will be much similar to what we see in Word, Excel, Office, and so forth. So whether we like this or not, I don't know if that really matters. The key is here that for the end users using the program, everything should feel much more familiar going forward. Then we also have another news. We have online data modeling editing capability updates. So we could already do some editing in the online data models, but now we can do a little bit more. We can configure and edit the relationships of our models. You can see there's a whole new list where we could get a quick overview of all the different relationships using some sleek icons to make it very clear, very fast what kind of relationships they are. So you can clearly see what is one-to-one, one-to-many relationships, many-to-many relationships, as well as the filtering direction of those relationships. So it's a very neat overview of our model. We also have the possibility here to add filters to specific relationships, and of course we can also edit them, change them within the model. So we now have a possibility to change our relationships directly in our data model online without having to open the Power BI desktop. Cool addition. Then we also have the semantic link for Power BI in Python and Spark. So with the semantic link, we can now connect to our Power BI datasets. We can query, explore, and read our data, and we can read our measures directly from within those datasets in our code. So that means if we're programming in Python, we can actually use this new SymPy Python library, which will let us connect to a Power BI dataset and fetch data from it, even from the measures within that dataset. So I think this is a really cool addition that will help us with probably a bunch of new use cases, even a lot of them that I don't have the imagination to come up with right now. But some of the use cases I've seen so far and had considered so far is, of course, being able to query and explore the data of Power BI datasets and measures could help by enabling applications to use this data right out of the box. We could also use it to validate the data in our Power BI and do this programmatically from within Python or even from a Spark notebook in Fabric. We could also utilize this to do some sort of live write back to Power BI datasets. So imagine that we're querying the dataset, we find out some new insights, something we want to enrich our data with. We could technically now write this back into our lakehouse. And if we're using direct lake connection in our dataset, that data would be reflected on, would be updated in the dataset immediately. So technically we can now read data from our dataset and write changes back into the same dataset, all within Python code. So very dynamic and very programmatic. And finally, we can automatically detect relationships. We can join the data. We can get a 360 overview of our dataset from code, which could help us with documenting our datasets, but could also help us with detecting data quality issues. So we could do things like query dimensions, query facts, making sure that when we're grouping by those dimensions, that the values are within some certain range or so forth. The possibilities are endless, is basically what I'm trying to say. And to sum it up, we can now use our Power BI dataset in Python code. Really neat, very flexible feature. Then we also have a bunch of non-released features, but a new released roadmap for Microsoft Fabric. So in October, Microsoft released the roadmap for Fabric, which had news and roadmaps for each individual experience. So we have more than we'll be able to cover in this session today. But luckily, this is just a roadmap. So the features are not here. So we will be able to cover them going forward whenever they are released. But just to sum up some of them, we have news within admin governance, OneLake, Power BI, Synapse, and Data Factory. And each of these subcategories will have its own roadmap with so many new features. So if we start with the admin governance, OneLake, and data warehousing, there are a few interesting features here I would like to point out. There is a lot, and there's, yeah, of course, more than we can cover. But around all of them, there are two things that seems to be in most of the experiences, new features. One is Git integration, another is integration with the deployment pipelines. And for me, this is one of the notable releases to keep track of, when we will finally be able to develop our full solution in Fabric and have it version controlled in Git, but also be able to use the deployment pipeline to make sure that we have a proper segregation of our development, test, and production environment. And when that has been enabled by all the experiences, is for me the time where Fabric can really shine and become a unified data platform. Aside from that, we also have, if we look at the list, we also have API support for a lot of them. And we have specifically for OneLake, we have the security model that is incoming. Very, very, very important feature, but it's set for second quarter 2024. So I'm looking forward to that. But if we're looking at very setups with high security requirements right now, maybe it's better to push off those plans for 2024. And finally, for the warehousing, there's a very interesting feature here which will let us save our SQL queries, our SQL queries as views, or even make the result of the query turn into a table. So that is something that I'm very interested to see how will be implemented, and it sounds like a very neat shortcut for analytical data analysts to create actual pipelines based on just being able to do SQL queries. More than that, we also have news on the data engineering and the data science part. There are so many here that is worth mentioning that I will have to pick out just some of them. Schema support for Lakehouse should make us able to do better categorization of our objects. Copilot integration in notebooks, of course, will let us become so much quicker at developing and writing code in notebooks, but also in particularly notebooks in app is something that I'm looking forward to. Being able to not only have Power BI elements in our apps in Fabric, but also be able to now add notebooks for a bunch of use cases. And finally, we had also the semantic link. We also already talked about that, but we also have data wrangler improvements to the data science experience. Finally, we have also so many news for Data Factory. I, in particular, am very excited to hear about some of the features that are coming to the Dataflow Gen 2, which is the easier to use version of data ingestion in Fabric, where we will see support for incremental refresh. We will see fast copy support. It's a way to actually copy data similar to what we do in pipelines, but with the Dataflow UI. And we will see enhancements to how we output the data as well as Git integration. So having all that in first quarter of 2024 is something that makes me very, very excited about the future in Fabric. And then finally, for real-time analytics, the longest list of all features, and there is a lot. Well, we have things like Copilot integration. We will have Event Stream now being able to put its data directly into Data Activator. We have integration with notebooks, so we can use our real-time data directly in our notebooks, as well as getting Delta support for the KQL database, meaning that real-time analytics will suddenly be part of the whole unified data format that is the Parquet and Delta format used in all the other experiences of Fabric. So it seems like we have a really good list here, and when we have all these capabilities, Fabric is much, much more mature. And most of them are, if you noticed, are scheduled for this quarter, so fourth quarter of this year, and the rest is and the rest of them is scheduled for first quarter next year and second quarter the year after. Of course, there may come new features that are not on the list yet for the years going forward, but those are what we can look forward to right now. And one of them was the Data Activator, being able to create alerts and actions based on our data. So speaking of Data Activator, let's look into our spotlight of the day, which is Data Activator. So with Data Activator, we will be able to use our data in a completely new way. So in Power BI, we use our data by looking at it, by analyzing it, by studying it, by learning from it. Data Activator is something completely different. Data Activator will let us take an action on that data, and it will let us do that in real time. So the moment something is wrong, or something is fantastic, or something that we should actually do something about, we can trigger an action. And it does it with a completely new UI. It does it as a completely new experience in Fabric, using the data that we already have in Fabric. So we can connect it to a Power BI report and use a specific data point from there. We can have it connect to our real-time streaming pipelines from the real-time analytics experience and use the data from there. And in this way, it will become the tool that lets us energize and use our data much faster and much more systematically than we may otherwise have been able to. So let's dig into it. Let's see how it works. So on the surface, Data Activator, and we will also go through this in a demo. So if this screen is a little bit small, don't worry. You will see how this works. We will be able to select our data and view at a glance how this is moving over time. We will be able to detect patterns in that data and find those outliers that we want to base our actions on. And finally, we'll be able to set up an action so we can act on the data. Currently we can send emails, we can send Teams messages, and I believe we can also do some Power Automate triggers here. But let's look into this in the service. And finally, if we set all this up, the result of this will now be that I can trigger a message, in this case an email, to be sent to a recipient about one of our data points suddenly not living up to one of our requirements. So we can take very quick and very fast action on our data. Let's take a look. Oh, wait. Yeah. So this is the Fabric user interface. I just went here and created a new Data Activator object. So this object here is called a reflex. I then connected this to some real-time demo data here. This is a simulation of some sort of package delivery service where we have packages being shipped. We have packages being, let's zoom out a bit here so you can see the actual data. Oh, there you go. So you have here packages being shipped, packages in transit, and packages being delivered. And for each of them, there are a bunch of data points here. So what I can do is I can pick these data points and make some analysis on it. So I can go here and say, well, I'm interested in packages in transit. So let's imagine I want to study and find out how we can ensure that our packages, which has maybe seafood in it, does not go above a certain temperature range. This is very, very it's a very real-time use case application. I mean, making sure that food doesn't spoil or go bad or become a health risk. So the first thing I need to do is I need to pick my object. So in this case, the unique identifier of my data that I want to track. And in this case, these are my packages. So my package ID is kind of my key here. I want to create an object based on that. I can click it and click create an object. Or I can also go here and say I want to assign this data to a new object and do this more manually. So I could say I want to create an object here called the package. And I want to define the key column to be the package ID. And could even assign some properties to it right away if I want to do that. And in this case, I'm interested in the special care property and the temperature. The special care is the property that defines if this is seafood or not, and temperature is the temperature over time. I can then save and here and go to the design mode. And you see, for me, it already created the actual event here, which is the package being moved in transit in real time. So we can see each and every little piece of data point here up in the graph. So every now and then we get a new timestamp of something new happened to this package. I can expand this to show more than 24 hours if I want to do that, or less. And then it created automatically for me also these properties, which are like dimensions. So we have here the temperature property and the special care property. And that's fine. Now I have the data that I want to work with, but I want to set up now an actual rules so that we can start acting on the data. I do this by creating a new trigger. And in the new trigger menu, there will 3 new views appear. So we have the select view, we have the detect view beneath, and then finally the act view. And we need to go through all of these 3 steps to set up our Data Activator reflex workflow. First of all, I pick what's interesting to me. I can pick here an existing property special care temperature. Though that's not the object I care about. I care about the package in transit. Actually, I care about the temperature, so I could also pick this from the property. And as you can see here, we actually can track now some of these objects. And we can track how the temperature moves over time. So we can see for some of them, when they start going in transit, the temperature will naturally rise. It makes sense, they've been cooled down, and it will go up and up and up to a certain limit. That's cool. But maybe we have a limit up here where they cannot go above a certain point. This is what I do in detection. So I can now say I don't want this temperature to ever become greater than, let's just say 150, 130. And that gives us a few bullet points here, and that's cool. But this is for all packages. I actually also need to add a filter here for special care. It doesn't need to be a number. It needs to be here. It needs to be equal seafood. And now it's filtering to only packages with seafood. And you can see here there is one package which consistently has been over this value for a few data points. Now, this view can be a little bit confusing, but it's actually split up into two parts. So the first part will show you which of your data points that will be triggered or that will satisfy this criteria. But it's only from our chosen population. It's only from our chosen example segments. So up here, we actually can choose how many examples we want to view at the same time. So I could expand this list. You can see up here, if I expand it with a few more, it will actually update and add more graphs, more data points to my overview here. Same thing happens down here, and you see suddenly there's another one popping up with triggers that it's above this certain temperature range. That's nice if I know which kind of samples that I want to use as my baseline. So let's say we actually had a case in our company where some delivery was spoiled because it had too high of a temperature. We can actually go and find this delivery in our data then and use it as our example data in here. And then I could analyze it in here and find, okay, but it actually went over this limit a lot of times. So let's set a rule around this time. So we can both explore the data and find out where our limits and detection criteria should be based on. And we can also set them up and see then the result of doing so. So that was the first view. And the second view in the bottom isn't limited to these example data points or the example packages. So those are for all our data points. So this is the actual result of, if we set up this rule now, it is telling us that we will get around 4 warnings per hour going forward. Maybe that is a bit much. Maybe I'm not interested in that. Maybe I'm more interested in getting a warning if it's been above this this limit for more than 3 times in a day or 3 times in a few hours, something like that. Well, we can go and limit this and now hopefully get a lot. That was a lot fewer data points. So maybe just 2. Oh well. That didn't work. So we'll go back to triggering this each time, but that's also fine. We have a capability here to distinguish between, do we want it to trigger every time or do we want to detect a pattern and then trigger at a given interval? So we could have done that, but apparently this data didn't have any double triggers. Once we set up this and we are aware of how many triggers we're going to spawn by doing this, we can finally go up and set up the action. What should happen all these times per hour when this happens? We could do something like an email. We could set up a Teams message, and there's a custom action here which is grayed out, which will let us do maybe something else. So for now, we could set up an email. We can trigger who needs to receive this, what should be the subject, the headline, the optional message, could be tests or something like that. Could even include some of the data from our actual data down here. So maybe I want to include that it's seafood. I want to include the temperature. I can do that. And then finally, I can save this Probably should rename it to something like seafood, seafood exceeding 130 degrees, something like that. I now have a trigger, I have some properties, and I have my event. I can now save this, it's already saved, and click start, and we'll actually start running. So I'll skip clicking this button to prevent myself from getting spammed with all these triggers, but I can click on the send me a test alert, and it will also, without starting it, without setting it all in motion, you can actually click and see how it looks. And by then it will successfully execute this test action based on the available data. Cool. So that was Data Activator. I think this is one of the very interesting additions to Microsoft Fabric and the whole real-time analytics part of Microsoft Fabric. And I think going forward, we will have an easier time identifying patterns in real-time data, but also generating actions based on it using this tool in Data Activator. That was what I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something, or happy and keen to tune in again next month. And besides that, I just wish you a good rest of October and November, and see you again in November. Thank you.